Every document has at least one set of purple column guides that describes where the left and right edge of their text column is. They're just guides, so you can ignore them if you want and put your text anywhere on your page, but guides are excellent for increasing productivity and ensuring consistency throughout a document. For example, on this page, we can see a purple guide on the left and a purple guide on the right, and we can see that this only has one column that actually takes up the entire page. In fact, these purple guides are on top of the margin guides, which are actually on top of the side of the page. If we can move this image, you can see that the side of the page was right there. I'll undo that, Command Z, Control Z on Windows to undo that. So this is not a very good example of columns. Let's go look at a better example by opening a new document from the File menu. In the New Document dialog box, we can see that there's an option for number of columns and the gutter. The gutter is the amount of space between each column whenever you have more than one. In this case, there's only one, so gutter is irrelevant. But if I increase this to 2 columns, now we can see that there will be a 1 pica gutter between them. Let's go ahead and click OK, and we can see that now we've got 2 columns, each delineated by these purple guides, and 1 pica of space of gutter in between them. Once you've set up your document, you can still change your columns easily enough, but you need to first go to your Pages panel and check to see what is selected. Currently, just page 1 is selected, so if I change my columns, it will only affect page 1. If I want to affect the master page, I need to select the master page. I don't actually have to go to the master page by double-clicking on it. I simply clicked once on it to select it. So I'm still looking at page 1, but I've selected the master page, and so that's what will be affected. I'll go to the Layout menu and choose Margins and Columns. The Margins and Columns dialog box looks very much like the New Document dialog box, but of course it just affects margins and columns. And in this case, I'm going to change the number of columns on my master page, because again, that's what's selected in the Pages panel, and I will update that to 3. And because the Preview checkbox is on, I can immediately see it update on the page behind me. And because the Preview checkbox is turned on, I can see it update immediately in the page behind the dialog box. Let's go ahead and increase the gutter. I can do it by 1 point, or by holding down the Shift key when I click on these arrows, increase them by larger increments. So now I've got a 3-column page with 3 pica gutters. I'll click OK, and you can see it take effect immediately. Again, I changed the master page even though I was looking at page 1, but it affected page 1, of course, because page 1 is tagged with the master page. It's based on that master page. So you can change your column guides on an individual page, a spread, multiple pages, or master pages. It's up to you, whatever's selected in the Pages panel. So that's how to change all the column guides the same way. You can also change just one column guide if you want by dragging it, but by default you cannot click and drag on it because it's locked. So instead you go to the View menu, choose Grids and Guides, and then turn off Lock Column Guides. When that's turned off, it's easy to click on a guide and drag it. You cannot change the amount of space in between the gutter by dragging it, but you can move the entire guide around. So now I've got 1 large guide in the middle and 2 small, narrow guides on either side of it. Whenever you turn off the Lock Column Guides and move your column guides around, it's a good idea to go back and turn it back on, just so you don't accidentally move them around later. Okay, so now we've got the theory of the column guides. Let's go look at them in practice. I'll close this document. I don't need to save it. And I'll go to my Jovco magazine, and I'll jump to page 4 and 5 by double-clicking on that spread in the Pages panel. Now that's selected, so any changes I make will apply to just that spread. I'll close the panel, and I can see that on this spread we have 3 column guides and some amount of space between in the gutter. I don't really know how much that is. On the left page, we don't really need the column guides. It's not really relevant, but we might as well just leave them there. But on the right side, we do have 3 columns of text. So you can see that on this spread, we have 3 column guides with some amount of space in the gutter. I'm not really sure how much. And on the left page, you can see that we don't really need the column guides. There's nothing there that requires column guides. But on the right side, there's 3 columns of text. These columns are actually created with text frames, individual text frames, 1, 2, 3, and you can see that they are linked together and the text flows. While this spread is selected, if we go to the Layout menu and choose Margins and Columns, and we're just going to change something about this. Let's say we'll change the size of the gutter between these columns. If I make this larger, let's say up to 2 pica 6, you can see that in the background here, the column guides have changed. The text frames have not changed because layout adjustment is not turned on. You might recall from the InDesign Essential Training title that in order for the objects on the page to change, we need to have layout adjustment turned on. So let's go ahead and click Cancel, choose Layout Adjustment, enable Layout Adjustment, click OK, and now once more we'll go to Margins and Columns. And this time, as we change our gutter, you'll see that the size of those text frames are actually being adjusted as I click. So now we've got a 2.5 pica gutter, and the size of the text frames have been changed. In fact, if we change the number of columns in here, let's make it 4 columns, you can see that not only did InDesign update all those text frames, but it even added a 4th text frame for us because it assumed, well, you probably want a 4th text frame there. So InDesign can be very intelligent when it needs to be. I'll click OK here, and the last thing I need to point out is if we do go ahead and turn off the lock column guides, so we can go in here and actually move our column guides, in this case, the text frames do not update. Layout adjustment does not affect any changes you make to the column guides locally by dragging them. It only affects the changes that you make from the margins and columns when you select it from the Layout menu. So if we wanted to tweak columns manually like this by dragging them, we would have to update our text frames manually by dragging them and so on. So that's a little bit more of a hassle. When you're building a structured document with more than one column of text, such as a newspaper or a magazine like this, carefully positioning and managing your column guides can be a real lifesaver. Now, in the next movie, we'll take a look at a few more details of how to use multi-column text frames.